Mike, I want to ask Alex about creative freedom,
here.
Yeah.
I'll pull them out for you right now. You want to see how much I love Generation X?
Look at that.
Here is the US edition of the first album.
I have that copy.
Here is the UK edition of the first album. Here is the deluxe box set that came out last year, remastered by Billy Idol and Tony James themselves.
Nice.
You know, with the complete UK first album, and then a second one that contains all the singles and unreleased stuff and unreleased
that's awesome.
mixes. You know,
yeah, I mean, perfect.
That was a big influence on what I do with the Hormones. So,
yeah.
But anyway, let me ask you. So, are we already rolling here?
Here we are, Generation X. Welcome, everybody. We got Tim Stegall here. Tim's a writer for the Alt Press, the Austin Chronicle. He is the head guy in a band called the Hormones, has a podcast, Radio Napalm, and we're going to just get into it.
Yeah, it's, you know, kind of the gist of this, right? I mean, we all, I don't even know how it all started. We started a conversation after reading a article in Psychology Today about, what's the name, Greg from Husker Du. And it was about how do you maintain your punk ethos as an adult with family and you know, all that. And then we start talking. It's like, you know, it's a great idea for, you know, first it was like his great idea for a movie script, right? Well, let's just kind of, let's dial it back a little bit with our grand vision here, and let's just start talking to people about it, right? Well, so, you know, and what we want to know, you know, I know you from here in Austin. I live here on Paul's out in LA. I think my old band, Hot Wheels Jr., may have even played with the Hormones once.
You did.
Twice. Yeah. So
you did. I can't remember exactly when, but you did. I remember. It
was probably at the Hole in the Wall, more than likely, right?
Oh my God. So that would have been back in the heyday.
Back in the heyday.
Yeah, back when I was a lot thinner and
same. Younger, we were all younger and cuter back then.
When I was much thinner and the hair color wasn't just a lifestyle choice. I mean, it was a lifestyle choice and not a necessity, you know?
Yeah. So, all right, Tim, where are you from? Are you from here in Texas?
I'm from a little town called Alice near Corpus Christi.
Oh yeah, awesome. Yeah, I know that.
And I was the sum total of the punk scene in Alice, Texas, when I was growing up. I literally was it. There was no one else listening to this music, and I would get asked by people, you know, I'm walking around with hair not dissimilar to what I still wear to this day.
Yeah.
And, you know, these home painted Sex Pistols t-shirts, and I get asked questions like, so who listens to these records besides you?
Mm-hmm.
Or these bands besides you? And I would tell them, well, they actually press up exactly one copy of each of these records just for me. I am the sole means of support for this music worldwide. I think these fuckers believed me.
Yeah. Private collection, man.
Yeah.
So what were some of your first records before you got into some punk music? Kiss and Led Zeppelin, like the rest of us?
No. I never had a metal bone in my body.
That's funny.
Never liked that music. That's why I got into punk rock, because it wasn't Ted Nugent, nor was it disco, nor was it the urban cowboy phenomenon that started happening. No, the first records I owned were my mom's teenage 45s from the 50s.
Right.
Elvis and Chuck Berry and, you know, Slippin' and Slidin' by Little Richard and, you know, Wake Up Little Susie by the Everly Brothers, Peggy Sue by Buddy Holly. You know, like that was my first record collection, and that was where a lot of my taste comes from. I mean, to this day, I honestly ask myself, what would Chuck Berry do? You know, what would Bo Diddley do? what would Elvis do? I mean, Elvis was the first punk as far as I'm concerned. He was the first punk rocker. Listen to Hound Dog. That's not too dissimilar to the Ramones.
Right. I was gonna say, when you listen to the Ramones, like I remember, you know, we were talking about punk rock, and I was playing some punk for my uncle, who's, you know, 15, 20 years older than me, and he was like, you know, this is like good old 50s rock and roll. You know, there's not much, you know, it's straight ahead. There's, you know, verse, chorus, verse, and it's fun. Very, very much, very similar to what was going on, right?
3 chords and an attitude. You've got 2 minutes, 30 seconds. Get in, say what you have to say, and get out. I mean, it's, you know, that was something that struck me by the time I started buying Sex Pistols records and Buzzcocks records and all that. At the same time, I was hearing things like You Really Got Me by the Kinks, or My Generation by the Who, and The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust. And I was just thinking, this all sounds like punk rock to me. You know, that's the thing. Punk initially was meant to be stripping rock and roll back down to its roots.
Right.
To that basic, you know, rage, that basic teenage energy, that rowdy spirit, making simple music that anybody could play in their garage. And that was part of what appealed to me about it. And it's one of the reasons why, even though I liked the early hardcore bands who came along shortly after I'm starting to buy records and all of that, and I did buy Damaged by Black Flag and, you know, the Bad Brains debut cassette, and, you know, Wild in the Streets by the Circle Jerks. I was buying all those records and I loved those, but shortly after that, hardcore became this formula where it was a bunch of guys playing heavy metal riffs at ridiculous tempo and probably not playing it very well. And their idea of political discourse was fuck Reagan, nuclear war, fuck Reagan, nuclear war. You know, they all had names that basically I turned into ATI, any 3 initials. You know, it wasn't even as clever as what the Dead Kennedys were doing. You know,
no, I that's about, I went to college in 85 to 1991, you know, took the long tour. And that's what I remember, like the local bands. I went to school in San Antonio, and there was a lot of great rock and roll bands out of there and great punk bands, but there was a large faction of, which you're right, it's very much, it was bad metal for better, you know?
Yeah, well, that was the thing. It's like,
it was about the violence, not about the fun. So
all those, that was the other thing, was the audience primarily became, you know, your football team shaving their heads and putting on combat boots and beating each other up in front of the stage as they ran around. You know, it's like a very violent square dance or something like that. And suddenly you're not seeing, as, you know, original punk was very inclusive. I mean, there were a lot of gays involved. There were a lot of you know, people of other colors. There were women involved, and nobody thought anything of it. And suddenly you're not seeing these strong female figures like Penelope Houston, the Avengers, or Alice Bagg, you know, at the front of that stage. You're not, you know, punk suddenly had this rule book, and that didn't interest me. And it was about the time that all became codified. And also, you know, on top of that, let me go back a second. We're talking about, you know, a bunch of those guys in the hardcore bands were dudes who grew up on heavy metal, but they could not play. So once they learned how to play from years of playing, you know, thrash music, well, now they've got to be in the metal band they always wanted to be in. Right. You know, and this led to speed metal, and I certainly have a lot of respect for, say, Metallica, but, you know, it's like, there's a phrase that Charles Bukowski came up with that just best describes why I'd never liked heavy metal: unoriginal macho energy. Okay. It's rock music without the roll. You gotta have you got to have that roll
You
in
gotta
there,
have the groove, man. Gotta be a groove.
There's got to be a groove. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
this is that's the whitest music ever, hardcore. I mean, it's white enough to make the Beach Boys sound like James Brown, okay?
You know, there's a great documentary. I'm not sure if you've seen it. It's Minnesota Hardcore, and
That's fantastic.
it's fantastic. I binged it, and they talk about that in that show about how it was just taken over. You know, the scene was really cool and pure for a while, and guys wanted to get out and dance and, you know, really, you know, and mosh and stuff. But then, you know, it just really got taken over by a macho element, and as a result, it
Right.
kind of just splintered and went to shit, unfortunately.
Well, I remember those Fugazi shows where they would shut down the show and say, "Hey, man, we're not doing this shit." You know?
Yeah.
Turn on the lights. Turn on the lights. You know, it's like at the time when I was like, you know, 18, 19 years old, I was like, these guys don't want to have any fun. But then I realized, you know, in hindsight, I'm like, no, they're just trying to stop the macho bullshit from happening.
Yeah.
Exactly. And think about this, you know, Husker Du, 2/3 of that band was gay.
Yeah.
Right.
Nobody knew it at the time.
Right. It's
But, you know,
boys, part of the scene.
well, that's the
Yeah.
thing. Austin was very different from everywhere else in that the two major punk frontmen in this town were Biscuit and Gary Floyd.
Yeah.
Two guys who, you know, were these very large, very burly gay men. You did not want to fuck with these two. I mean, I know both of them. I knew Randy Biscuit Turner very, very well. I know Gary Floyd to this day. They're sweethearts, but no, you don't want to fuck with these guys, okay? Right. I'm sure if anybody started giving them any lip about their sexuality, they would have gotten a mic stand over the head from the stage.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, that diversity was lost. I mean, this is one of the reasons I became a punk rock journalist was, you know, I wasn't seeing the music that I liked by the time I got into college out there, except for some things like the Jesus and Mary chain and Sonic Youth and stuff like that. But, you know, I still loved old school punk rock. I wasn't seeing that music out there, but I did slowly start to discover that stuff underground. And there was nobody writing about it. So, you know, Lester Bangs was as formative an influence on me as Johnny Thunders or the Clash or the Sex Pistols. I always say that Lester Bangs is the reason I became a writer, the same as, you know, Johnny Thunders is the reason I became a musician.
Yeah.
I didn't see anybody who was writing with that sort of energy that Lester had, that sense of humor, that just kind of sideways philosophical bent that he had.
Yeah.
I'm going to read to you the very line that made a rock journalist out of me.
Awesome.
Okay.
All right.
Forgive me, I'm 55 years old. I have to wear reading glasses, kids, even though I wear contact lenses. But there was a book that I got when I was in Christmas, 1980, called The Rolling Stone Illustrated History of Rock and Roll. That was the place where I first read Ed Ward, who you saw me eulogize yesterday at the Austin Chronicle. Excuse me for a second. Yeah, forgive me. I was about to break up there. You know, Ed's death is hard, okay? Because you saw he mentored me. But anyway, Lester wrote about the British invasion in this book, as brilliant as anything else, but this was where I discovered his writing, and this is what this very sentence here made me fall in love with him and his work. Rock and roll at its core is merely a bunch of raving shit. Its utterly hysterical transience and intrinsic worthlessness, the not quite paradoxical source of its vitality. If you want to give rock and roll a definition, you can't come up with a better one than that.
That's right.
And it's, you know, Lester got the whole punk ethos better than anyone. If you want to read the most concise, best history of punk rock in its early days and how it developed, pick up the book that he wrote about Blondie. and
Okay.
look in there. There's a chapter called "And Another Pompous Blowhard Attempts to," something like, I can dig that book down right now as well from my bookshelf right next to me. Let me get the title of this to you. In which yet another pompous blowhard purports to possess the meaning of punk rock. First thing you see is the New York Dolls there. He wrote better about the New York Dolls in that chapter than anyone has, inclingme. Okay.
Right.
And just that
So
was
kind of
what
get an
I-
idea how you got into writing or why you got into writing, but is this something that you studied when you went to university, or is it?
Eventually I did, but what happened was, okay, I'll give you my journey here. 1985, back when I was still a drinking man, a drinking buddy of mine ended up the editor of the campus newspaper, the South Texan at Texas A&I in Kingsville, a school that no longer exists. It's now part of the Texas A&M system.
Yeah.
And Tim Delaney, we're one night getting tanked just as he had gotten the job as the editor of the campus newspaper. Like, Tim, you know about music. Can you write? Fuck yeah, I can write. Want to be our rock critic? And I said, I guess. He said, you'll get $25 per column to get records for free and write about them. I was like, what, you're going to pay me to get records for free? All I got to do is write some bullshit about it. Sign me up. And
You're like, you had me at records for free.
yes, exactly.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was where I got into it, and I had an aptitude for it. But then somebody came along as the editor of the paper, and I was quite controversial in my reviews. And this guy was telling me, well, Tim, you can't write about this stuff anymore. Nobody knows who Husker Du is.
Right.
Nobody knows who the Replacements are. You need to write about Hall and Oates. And I was like, fuck you. And it was at that point that I dropped out of college briefly, and I started a fanzine, the first fanzine in the Coastal Bend, called Noise, Noise, Noise. Ran for 2 issues. It coincided with an actual punk scene developing down in Corpus Christi, which I was a key part of. I wrote a scene report for Maximum Rock and Roll for a punk scene that did not exist in Corpus Christi.
That's awesome.
And I, at the bottom of the page, at the bottom of my scene report, I said, any bands want to play down here? Give me a call. This is my number. The day after that hit the stands, my phone rings in my mom's kitchen in Alice, Texas. Hello. Hi, is this Tim? Yeah. Hi, my name is Eric Tunison. I'm the drummer for a band called DeCroixson. They had just released Oktoberfaction, their second album. They were booking a US tour. I got off the phone with him and I called about 10 people I knew who were into this music. We found out that among us was the son of the owner of this well-known Hispanic ballroom and music store downtown. The Galvan Ballroom, Galvan Music was downstairs. And we hit Bobby up, and we were able to rent that for $100. 10 of us just put $10 in a pot.
There you go.
Rented the Galvan Ballroom, which was this beautiful sprung floor ballroom that apparently like people like the Glenn Miller Orchestra had played at, and stuff like that. There was a local new wave covers band, I think called the Little Ducks from Mars. We got them to do the sound that night. You know, they brought their PA. They basically did sound, except DeCroixson brought their own sound man. So
yeah,
and that was the first lineup of the Hormones. We needed an opening band. I'd been writing songs and playing guitar, but I hadn't been having any success trying to start a band in Alice. And, you know, a couple of my friends there in Corpus volunteered to play bass and drums. Awesome. And that was my first show. And that was like the first real official punk show to play Corpus. I mean, before that, Iggy Pop had come through The Red Rockers had come through. The Members from England had come through. Patti Smith came through in 1978, and that was the first show I went to when I was 12 years old.
Wow.
What year would that have been roughly?
That was July 1986.
Okay.
July 1986 that happened, and I did 2 issues of the fanzine, and it was not making any. It was not supporting itself, even though I was getting a lot of attention nationally. Getting written up in Flipside, stuff like that. I ended up calling up Al Flipside and saying, I can't do my mag anymore. I've got these interviews with the Lazy Cowgirls and Gigi Allen that I did for this next issue. Do you want them? Yeah. And that's how I ended up being the Texas correspondent for Flipside.
Yeah.
For a few years. Your Flesh, Peter Davis had seen my stuff and, asked me if I would write for them. It's like, soon it was like all these top fanzines from around the country were asking me, and even like one out of Finland called Rat Beat all asked me if I would contribute to their magazines. And, so yeah, I started building a name for myself there. A curious thing started happening at major labels. They started signing what they called alternative rock bands in 1988. Mm-hmm. A&M Records contracted me to write ad copy for these bands that they were signing, like the Mekons and stuff. And then Warner Brothers got a hold of me, and they wanted me to do some stuff they were publishing an in-house fanzine to promote their alternative artists. I can't even remember the name of it, but they flew me up to Cleveland to see a band that was called DAD here in America, because their name was Disneyland After Dark. They were from Holland or someplace, and the Walt Disney Corporation was not going to have this.
Yeah.
And I got flown up, and I was told, yeah, these guys are kind of like AC/DC. They're kind of like the Cult. About 2 songs into it, I turned around to the people from Warner Brothers that were at the show, and I said, have you fuckers ever heard of Hanoi Rocks?
Right,
and,
so there's glam rock. Yeah.
I went up to the band afterwards and said that to them. I said, oh yeah, we like the Gun Club and Hanoi Rocks and Iggy Pop, and I run into this guy named Mike Shea, who was publishing a fanzine called Alternative Press there. And he was trying to turn it into a newsstand magazine covering this music and all of that. I had an interview I had just done with Steve Jones from the Sex Pistols, detailing his whole history. He even told me about every heist he pulled off to get equipment for the Sex Pistols. I mean, he gave me dirt that he claims he doesn't remember.
I've heard some of those stories.
Yes. Well, I was probably the first to hear a bunch of this stuff. Like, how his Fender Twin Reverb came out of the back of Bob Marley and the Wailers tour van.
Right.
I'm sure there are Rastas who still want to kill Steve to this day for that one. But he nobody wanted to run this thing, and Mike said, I'll do it. I'll pay you $65 for this. Then he had his editor Joe Banks call me up, and he said, and Joe was asking me about the story, and he said, did Mike promise you money? I said, yeah. God damn it, I am tired of him doing. You know what? I'm going to make sure you get paid for this one. This is how I ended up the first paid writer for Alternative Press. It's all my fault that thing ended up on newsstands across America, a professional mag, eventually kind of the
glossy cover and all.
Yeah, glossy cover. It was already getting a glossy colored cover at the time that I came along.
Yeah.
But yeah, it started with me, and so that's why it's so funny that I'm back with the mag. You know?
Well, what's cool about like this story, right? I mean, this is what to me made punk rock so great, or just this is all before the internet. This was a network of people. They were communicating by telephone and sending letters. You could buy a record and you could write or drop a phone call into somebody long distance, and it was usually like somebody in the band who would pick it up. Well, and I remember booking our first tours with, we had a book and people to contact and bands to hook up with, and it was just all underground DIY stuff. And that's I don't think kids do that today or even get that.
there's not even like an internet version of Book Your Own Fucking Life.
Yeah.
That great resource that Maximum Rock and Roll used to do. And there should be something like that. But yeah, the internet has both been great and horrible for this culture in many, many ways, because, you know, in my day, you know, you didn't have Hot Topic. You had to go to a thrift store, and you had to find jeans and dye them black and peg them, because there's no skinny jeans in those days, kids.
That's right.
You know, you had to go to a sex shop to get these bracelets, okay?
Yeah.
All this sort of stuff, man. You know, it's like you had to cut your own hair. You probably dyed it with food coloring. You know, you're probably using Elmer's glue to get it to look like I do now. All this sort of stuff. I mean, it literally was DIY. It literally was do it yourself. And
so the running question, the running theme in a lot of these interviews that we do is like, how did that DIY kind of punk model help you out as an adult in navigating your career and all that other stuff, right? Like the things that you have to do as a grown-up.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. I was about to tell you, because I'm telling you about my journey and all of that. You know, I am what happens when punk goes professional. Okay. I mean, I ended up after 2 years at Alternative Press, moving up to Austin, and I sent in a couple of reviews unsolicited to the Austin Chronicle, and they ran them later that week. So yeah, you know, that's how I ended up there. A lot of it has been happy accidents for me, but this is what happens when punk goes professional. You don't necessarily stop being punk, but you know, you don't get the typical sort of jobs. Perhaps you maybe create your own job. Right. You maybe create your own cottage industry, your own media. I think that's the lesson somebody can learn from my own life and my own career. I mean, you know, I wasn't hearing the type of punk rock I wanted to hear at a certain point, so I started the Hormones. I wasn't reading the type of rock journalism I wanted to read, so I started writing. A good example as well is, okay, COVID happens. We go into lockdown and pandemic. There are no shows. Right. My drummer quit 2 days before lockdown. So I don't even have a Hormones lineup right now. I was getting antsy. I couldn't play my music anymore. So I started doing a monthly series of live streams at Facebook. Just me and my electric guitar, solo electric punk rock. I charge $5 suggested donation that people can do through my PayPal or my Venmo or my Cash App, whichever they're comfortable with. And yeah, it's just, you know.
You paved the way with that too. A lot of people followed you into that, like the Jeff Rosenstocks of the world. You know, like they're kind of like a coattail on that thing.
Yeah,
I've spent many a Saturday afternoon, kind of the beginning of the pandemic, with Jesse from D-Generation, one of my Malik. Yeah,
old friend of mine.
Yeah, I looked at some of your old your stories in Alternative Press, and I did see there was an old D-Generation article, and I thought about that, and I was like, you know, and a great storyteller, great, you know, it was fun. I just let him run in the background. I'd pay attention to a handful of songs, and I'd just let him run because he'd start telling these stories, his bits. Yeah.
Jesse can ramble. He always has.
great stuff, right? So I'll tell you, one of the things I like about the writing, right? About your writing, right? Is it you're diverse, right? It's not there's a lot of writers who they write about a genre and they stick really tight with that genre, and anybody that's not in that narrow view is criticized, right? You ever write bad reviews?
I try to avoid that, honestly.
Right. Thank you.
I don't want to waste my time and my words on music I don't like. I have written bad reviews, especially when I was younger, and a lot of times, like, I used to do some work for Yahoo Music when it first came along in the mid 90s. And my editor there was Dave DiMartino from Cream Magazine, who I was thrilled to work with. And he said he hired me because I was the one young writer he saw out there who could have been at Cream, which was like the best compliment you could have paid me.
That's awesome.
But Dave used to love sending me like a Fish album or, the latest Rolling Stones live travesty with, someone like, I don't know, Beyonce or somebody guesting or whatever, whoever it was at the time. It was Jennifer Lopez, I think, who appeared on that particular album. And he would just deliberately give me these records he knew I was going to just rip to shreds. And, I admittedly had a lot of fun with it. I mean, especially tearing into Fish. But, generally it's like, no, I'm not going to pitch something at an editor just to tear it apart. There have been recent instances, especially at the Chronicle, where I think Raul Hernandez, my editor, will assign me something, especially during festival time, because he wants to see me write, what the fuck is this shit?
Right.
The most notorious being a band called Fun.
Oh yeah, I think I remember those guys.
Yeah, I
think I got a free koozie from South by Southwest from them.
Yeah, I just ripped them up one side, down the other. I said, this is the fucking cast of Glee.
That's right.
Trying to do Queen. And god damn, that singer wants to play to the balcony, and I just said flat out, this isn't rock and roll. This is shit, and I literally, it was about 250, different versions of the phrase, this band fucking sucks and I hate them. And I think I had to block every single 12-year-old girl who was on Twitter at that time. Because of that. Oh yeah. No Effects, I tore to pieces a few years back when they played at Fun Fest, because Fat Mike had the nerve to get up there and say, yeah, we wrote this song before this festival even happened. And I was like, oh, fuck you. You don't go into the big boy's hometown and say shit like that. Oh, fuck you, you fucking frat boy. Fuck.
That's a stupid thing to say.
I very nearly got up on the stage and decked him for that one if I could have gotten close. That's funny. My God, that pissed me off. But
well, I tell you, I appreciate your writing so much. And that's why I'm so excited to get to talk to you. And
thank you, Paul.
Yes, you have such a cool style. I swear, when I first read you earlier, before we were going to interview you, I thought maybe you were a British guy because you just have that.
It's a higher education from Alice ISD right there, man.
No,
taught you all those big words.
There's just a certain attitude, And, I hope that doesn't come off as anything other than a strange compliment.
Yeah, Paul, I have a very thick Cockney accent, mate. Can you tell? Yes, I'm right from London. I am from Bromley, mate.
But I think that you provide a service to people who may have missed this or that. Like your lists, the list that you do, the year lists, sort of like artists influenced by this artist type things. Like emo lists or post-punk lists that you've done. I mean, you're bringing, to me and to, everybody else who reads you, it's an education that I think is lacking and that we really need. And so I really thank you for that.
Well, thank you. I will note that I have not done an emo list, and I don't know that I will, but okay. I have written about Rites of Spring, in the 1985 list, and certain acts like that heavily influenced emo.
I was listening to the Rites of Spring today.
Great record. Great record.
Maybe I meant your post-punk list that you've done.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I was especially happy with the hardcore list I just did. The early days of hardcore one I did.
I read that one, yeah, really cool.
I'm pretty certain that many of Alternative Press's readers, at least like their current demographic, not the old farts that have come back to the magazine because I'm writing for them again, but I'm pretty certain that its current demographic has no idea about the middle class, which that is the first hardcore record, that middle class, that first middle class album, EP. I'm sure most people wouldn't have thought about The Animals I'm Crying, from 1965 as being the earliest hardcore song. But I mean, listen to that. And then you go to I Gotta Write by Iggy and the Stooges. I mean, those are proto-hardcore songs, and a lot of people don't even think about that. Or, and honestly, it's like Motorhead was the best hardcore band ever outside of the Bad Brains, if you really think about it. That's why I had to talk about Motorhead in that introduction. But yeah, I try to get to people to think about certain things. I do have axes to grind when I do my annual lists, because it's like, I don't see anybody writing about Billy Childish anymore. So by gum, I'm going to put in every Billy Childish record that, comes out that particular year on the list. There's certain bands like that, it's like, okay, I'm going to introduce the youth to that. I'm excited to introduce the youth to Elastica in this 1995 list.
Right. Yeah.
Just certain things like that.
You have an outlet to get out what you want to. That's fucking awesome. Like, it's a platform to present your side.
I mean, I had like Danny Sage from D-Generation just profusely thanking me for writing about him and Richard when I did the best punk guitarists of the 90s list. And Rick Sims from the Digits as well. And I told them, look, if I'm writing the history of punk rock, the Digits are going to be in there. D-Generation's going to be in there.
Yeah. D-Generation was one of those bands that was kind of missed by me. I think that, that they were on the East Coast, and I think everything at the time when they hit was Seattle, right? I mean, they kind of came out around that time.
Kind of, and that's why they formed. They were a reaction to all of that. A New York Dolls style punk rock band for the times, and they were quite influential on a certain substrain of punk rock. I mean, they were certainly an influence on the Hormones. Yeah. I already knew Howie Pyro before that from a band that he had in the late 80s called the Freaks. And he was like, an early friend of mine once I started getting into all of this. And, but yeah, I got an assignment. I went up to New York City to do a story on D-Generation. And I came back home with about 3 or 4 pairs of stretch jeans that I bought at Trash and Vaudeville, as well as a few pairs of creepers. And I came walking into band practice, and my other bandmates were like, what's going on? I just said, we're going to start playing 30-minute sets. There's going to be no gaps between the songs. Our tempos are about to get faster here. Go dig out your old David Bowie and Cheap Trick records. We need to listen to those a little bit more here. They didn't know what the fuck to make of it, 6 months later, I've got a full face of makeup on stage, and people in the audience are like, what the fuck is he doing?
Yeah.
We flew right over everybody's heads around here. And it's funny because D-Generation came to Austin with opening for Social Distortion in 1996, I guess it was. After I had gone up to New York and done that story on them. And they opened, and the audience was just silent. No applause for them.
Huh.
It was just silent between songs. And me and about 10 people were the only people there, I think, to see D-Generation. And I was pissed off. I was pissed off about that, because Mike Ness got up there, and there's like tape marks behind him where his band is supposed to stand, so that they were a certain distance behind him.
Right.
And his first words were, are you ready for some punk rock? And, 5 songs later, he says, this one's for the ladies. And, it was clearly very rehearsed. And I found that out because a few weeks later we were playing in New Orleans the same night, at the same time that Social D and DGen were across town, and we got the hell down there after our set. And yeah, sure enough, Mike was saying the same things. They played the exact same set list. I mean, that unfortunately is also what becomes of punk when it goes professional in some cases.
Yeah.
I mean, that sort of brings up a question. We're X Gen now, and we like to talk about the cultural relevance of Generation X. The original punk rockers, all boomers. The Clash, boomers. The Ramones, boomers. Iggy's a boomer. The Sex Pistols are boomers. Did Gen X drop the ball when it comes to punk rock?
No, because we gave the world Nirvana. Okay, we gave the world the Digits. We gave the world the Muffs. We gave the world the Fastbacks. We gave the world grunge. And yeah, we did give them the original pop punk bands like Green Day and whatnot. No, we didn't drop the ball. We picked it up and ran a little further with it. And in some cases, I mean, yeah, it was amazing.
Scored a few touchdowns too, clearly. Right.
Yeah, it was amazing to me to see Green Day get the commercial success that the Ramones should have had.
Yeah.
The Ramones sounded to me like, when I first heard them, like the perfect AM radio band. That was like the Beach Boys with Marshall amps, you know?
Yeah.
I couldn't figure out why something like Rock, Rock, Rock Away Beach did not become a number one seller. You know, you got that melody, you got that positive, upbeat energy, you got that great grinding guitar sound. You know, it's
a lot of those others don't have longevity. It stands the test of time. It almost grows in size as the years pass, even though it didn't get its due then.
Somebody like the Ramones or the Buzzcocks should have at least become as big as Cheap Trick.
Yeah.
At least.
Cheap Trick put out a new record this year.
Yeah, I haven't heard it yet.
I heard a couple songs. Good. Sounds like Cheap Trick.
I always have time for Cheap Trick.
That's right.
Always have time for Cheap Trick. One of my favorite bands. I've interviewed them, and specifically Rick Nielsen, about 5 times right at this point.
They were great, man. They were an unusual band for sure.
Well,
yeah.
As
Robin
I told
was
Rick,
a pretty boy. Well, that bass player too. I forget his name. That boy.
Well, yeah, you had the 2 glamour pusses.
Yeah.
Then you had Hunts Hall from the Dead End Kids on lead guitar, and he's got a million very silly guitars.
Yeah.
And then you got this accountant, you know, having a couple of martinis and a cigarette on drums.
Yeah.
I interviewed Bunny last September for a 2-parter that ran in Ugly Things, and that was so much fun. I got the entire early history of the band. I got all this stuff. I got the origins of their look. I got where the typewriter logo came from. I got,
that's awesome.
You know, and most of their classics were written before they had a record deal. Rick had already written Surrender. He'd already written I Want You to Want Me. He'd already written Southern Girls, all that stuff. They had 40 original songs before they signed with Epic.
That's amazing.
You know, it's just, they're incredible. They still are. I mean, even without Bunny in the band, and they've got Rick's son Dax playing drums now.
Yeah, I've seen that lineup. Yeah.
They're still Cheap Trick.
Yeah, they're great.
I mean, I hear people complain, but it's like, fuck you, you're not listening. This is still Cheap Trick.
Yeah. They cut a song with John Lennon. I mean, not many bands from that time got to do that. So.
Yep.
Well, okay. Yep. So Tim, we like to keep these at an hour. So I got another question. Mark, you got anything else?
No, it's been great.
Take us to today. What should we be listening to today that you think is relevant and carries the torch?
What carries the torch? That's a good question. I know that I constantly argue with people who try to tell me, you know, punk is dead or there's no good bands anymore. And I point out to them, I do this weekly radio show called Radio Napalm, and literally half the songs are brand new. I'm hard pressed at the moment to think of anything like that. I could tell you about local bands that have impressed me over the last few years. The Pistolators are certainly a very good old school punk rock band. There's one called Rebel Flesh that's really good. I mean, if you love the Ramones and Misfits, you're going to love Rebel Flesh.
Idols do anything for you?
Idols, they're all right. That's definitely a post-punk band. I've seen them live twice. I've written a little bit about them. I know the last band that absolutely knocked me upside my head, over the last 10 years, there were a few of those actually, come to think of it. The Jim Jones Review, first of all, comes to mind. Oh my God, that band had energy. And then there was a band called the Stripes that were all these teenagers from
England,
from Ireland, actually.
Ireland, okay, yeah.
They broke up a couple of years ago, and that genius lead guitar player who was like, he was as good as Jeff Beck when he was 17. He's now doing indie music, and I don't like what I've heard. It's pretty weak. But that was astonishing. I think
they did a Nick Lowe cover. Did they do a Nick Lowe cover?
Yes, they did. Heart of the City.
Heart of the City. Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw them at South by Southwest, and I swear I was watching The Clash again.
That's awesome. So what was the one we were talking about earlier, Paul? Speaking of Cheap Trick, they might be a little too poppy for you, but the White Reaper. Have you heard those guys?
Who?
White Reaper.
Have not heard of them.
Very Cheap Trick kind of cars, Thin Lizzy harmony guitar solos, young kids. They have a good time. They put on a good show.
Okay,
a lot of fun. They're very poppy though.
The Riverboat Gamblers are putting out records again, and
I saw that. Yeah.
They're astonishing. So yeah, it's like if
They're
there's anybody that's carrying the torch, it's the Riverboat Gamblers.
Yeah.
Where can we hear your radio show?
Beg your pardon?
Where can we hear your radio show?
Oh God. It's at podomatic.com. I have not done an episode in a little while here. It's been a little hard. I don't have sponsorship anymore for the show, so it's been hard for me to do it. And I tried to set up a Patreon page for people to support it. Just do $5 a month, and I've only had 3 people sign up for that. Mm-hmm. I don't know what to do to get any more people involved with that, but I'd like to get another episode together, but I've been working a whole lot.
Yeah, sounds like it. Keep busy.
It definitely.
And what's your next article coming out?
I think the next one coming out is going to be this 1995 best of list, probably. But yeah, I got I've got in the works that I got in the works part 2 of the Jello Biafra interview I did. But the problem is that I'm still having to edit the hell out of it because I spoke to Jello for 3 hours.
Yeah, it's probably all important.
It is.
Right.
Seriously, it really is. I mean, I've known that guy for many, many years. Dear friend of mine. I think he's a genius, but it's like, I should have known. It's like, oh shit. Yeah, he's going to talk to me way too long. I mean, the first time I interviewed Jello was when he did that record with Mojo Nixon, that country record. And I was supposed to meet up with the 2 of them. It was supposed to be a press conference. Well, you had Motormouth Tim Stegall there and Motormouth Jello Biafra. It became a Tim Stegall interview with Jello Biafra to the point where nobody else got to ask a question. And then Mojo Nixon got tired of, sitting there going, and he finally got up and walked out and went downstairs to the bar.
There you go.
I mean, yeah, Jello shut Mojo Nixon up, okay?
Yeah, and not like that guy's got he's kind of got a big mouth himself, right? So
exactly, that's what I'm saying.
Awesome. Well, hey man, this has been a lot of fun. Good to talk to you.
Thank you. Yeah,
we need to have another episode where we talk about Les Paul Juniors with P90 pickups in it.
Hey, I could talk all day about that stuff, man.
Right.
Definitely about guitars in general, but yeah, I could talk all day long about the Les Paul Jr.
We'll be looking out for the next hormone show as well.
Hopefully this summer. I'm trying to look into where I can go rehearse with this band at this point. Music lab is closed down, so I don't know where to rehearse.
Right.
If I had a garage, I mean, I live in a 2-story walk up here. Okay.
Yeah.
Neighbors not so happy with your rehearsal schedule.
No, I'm sure they hate my live streams.
Yeah, funny.
Well, and we're going to be on all of your articles and spreading the word about everything that you do because it's so great. And we just really thank you for taking the time to chat with us.
Thank you. I wondered who the two guys were that were reading my articles all these years.
So thank you so much for taking the time, and we'll hopefully talk again at some point.
Well, thank you. I mean, I appreciate it. I'm always surprised that anybody wants to talk to me, but so I'm always grateful that it's good to find out that somebody is reading this stuff seriously.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Of
We
course,
love
man.
it.
It's I'll see you around town. Paul won't, but I will.
All right.
All right, man. Take it easy.
Good to meet you too. Bye-bye now.
Yeah, bye.
Take care.